Good morning, folks. That was Max Roach with the J.C. Watts Singers, 1969, Were You There When They Crucified My Lord? His tribute to Martin Luther King a year after Dr. King's murder. And at least for me, whenever I do this kind of stuff, it's always important to fill the room. You know, as Baraka told us so long ago in blues, people, the spirits do not descend without music. So it was very important to fill the space this morning. I am quite honored and also humbled to be here this morning to be asked to provide the keynote for this very, very important conference. Ms. Britton was priceless as she reached out to my good friend of nearly 40 years, Joan Morgan. We grew up in the same tenement building in the Bronx, so I've known Joan since I was 3 years old, and Ms. Britton sends Joan an email sheepishly asking, can you contact Professor Neal and see if he would be willing to provide the keynote? And I was trying to figure out when I became that guy, you know, that folks didn't feel comfortable emailing directly to ask these kinds of things. And I can remember sitting at NYU 13 years ago. NYU did this incredible soul conference. I was still a graduate student at the University of Buffalo in American Studies. And I remember going to that conference, and Houston Baker was there, and Monty Adiawara, and Trisha Rose was still teaching there, and Robin Kelly was around, and all these folks, and sitting there as a graduate student saying to myself, wow, I can't wait till, you know, I get asked to do one of these panels at one of these kick-ass conferences like this. So I am quite honored to be here this morning. And again, particularly in the context of this particular date and what this date signifies, this kind of broader notion of Black death, if you will, based on what happened in Memphis 40 years ago. But it also speaks to some of the tensions of what I'm going to talk about this morning. In a marketplace economy like the one that we have now, there is so very little space to actually meditate on someone like Martin Luther King in public forums. So what you've seen over the last week or so has been this rush of pieces from every online journal and every newspaper and every magazine. The Today Show spent 4 hours in Memphis this morning, you know, asking people to hurry up very quickly to hit a deadline to talk about Martin Luther King, as if somehow Martin Luther King didn't deserve a larger level of deep thought. And for me personally, you know, it is very frustrating. I'm in the process now of beginning to blog for a online news site, which shall remain unnamed at this moment. They launch sometime in the next week or so. And what we're being told are things like, you know, what we need you to write about are timely topics, right? And also anniversaries, right? So like the King death, you know, that's an anniversary, write about that. And we don't want you to do so in more than 800 words. And if you could attach some video to it or some song to be downloaded, because what we figured out is that if there's a video and if there's some music, you'll get more clicks. And it's like, well, what about like information and ideas? So this paper is born out of this kind of frustration at this moment. Fragments of a feedback loop, Blackness in Conversation.